Constantinople, 548 AD, behind gilded doors that guard the heart of an empire, physicians gather in silence around a bed draped in Tyrian purple, the color reserved only for those who command half the known world. The woman dying upon those silken sheets once performed on stage for coins, and the cruel laughter of men who saw her as nothing more than flesh to be consumed. Now she wears the crown of an empress, and the most powerful ruler on earth kneels beside her bed, weeping like a child. Emperor Justinian holds her hand as priests chant prayers for her immortal soul, as courtiers bow their heads in reverence, as the empire itself seems to hold its breath. But the servants who dress her, who have cleaned her chambers and walked her corridors in the dead of night, they exchange knowing glances. They carry secrets that could shatter the golden image of Byzantine glory, secrets about what really happened when those palace doors closed and the world stopped watching. Because Theodora of Constantinople lived not one life, but 3 lives that should never have existed in the same body. The public saw a pious empress who built churches and championed the powerless. The court knew a ruthless political mind who could order massacres without a tremor of conscience. But there were others, those midnight visitors and silent witnesses, who knew something darker still. This is the story of how a bearkeeper's daughter climbed from the brothels of Constantinople to the throne of the Byzantine Empire, how she weaponized everything she had learned in those degrading years to seize power that no woman before her had ever touched, and how she managed to die venerated as a saint despite a past that would destroy anyone else who dared speak of it. The year is 500 AD, and in the shadowed underbelly of the hippodrome, little Theodora watches her father die. Not from the claws of the bears he trains for the racing crowds, but from something far more mundane and far more cruel. A scratch that festers, an infection that poisons his blood, and within days the man who provided for his family is gone. Theodora is perhaps 5 years old, and she cannot yet comprehend that her world has just collapsed in ways that will transform her into either the greatest survivor or the greatest monster Byzantine history will ever record. Her mother's solution is born of pure desperation. Within a week of burying her husband, she parades Theodora and her sisters through the hippodrome, offering them to whichever racing faction will provide protection in exchange for their father's position. The Greens, who had employed him, reject them publicly and without mercy. The Blues, their blood rivals, accept them as a calculated insult to the Greens. This moment, this public humiliation of 3 girls under the age of 10, will echo through the corridors of power in ways that no one present can possibly imagine. By the age of 12, Theodora is performing in the theaters of Constantinople, which in the 6th century serves as legalized exploitation with costumes and cold art. The law makes no distinction between actress and prostitute. They are one and the same. You dance, you strip, you service whoever pays enough. Sometimes the performance is the service, acted out on stages for audiences who pay to witness things that would be criminal if they were unclassified as entertainment. And young Theodora learns quickly that her body is the only currency that matters in a world designed to devour girls like her. If you're drawn to these forgotten stories of power born from suffering, stories of those who refuse to stay broken, hit that subscribe button, because history's darkest corners hold truths we were never meant to forget, and together we're pulling them into the light. But what Theodora understood, even as a child forced to degrade herself for survival, was something that would change everything. The men watching her, the senators and merchants and future emperors who paid to see her humiliation, they were revealing themselves to her. Every desire was intelligence to be catalogued. Every whispered request was leverage to be stored away. Every private encounter was a weapon she would one day wield. While they thought they were consuming her, she was studying them, memorizing their weaknesses, their secrets, their fears. And she was patient because she understood that power in Constantinople didn't belong to those born with it, but to those willing to do absolutely anything to take it. The transformation from theater girl to imperial consort required more than beauty or intelligence. It required a calculated reinvention so complete that it rewrote the very laws of the empire. When Theodora met Justinian in 522 AD, he was 40 years old, the adopted heir to the throne. Brilliant and obsessed with law and theology, and utterly inexperienced with women like her. She was 22, officially a wool spinner, a transparent fiction that everyone understood but no one dared question. The meeting wasn't chance. Theodora had been orchestrating it for months through a network of favors owed from her years in the shadows. She knew his routines, his weaknesses, his complete lack of defense against someone who understood exactly how to present herself as both intellectual equal and vulnerable soul in need of saving. Within weeks, Justinian was visiting her constantly. Within months, he spoke of marriage, which created a constitutional crisis that nearly tore the government apart. Roman law explicitly forbade senators from marrying actresses, not former actresses, but actresses forever. The stain was permanent, legally indelible, meant to keep the classes separate for all time. The Empress Euphemia, Justinian's adopted mother, blocked the union with the fury of someone protecting the honor of an entire dynasty. She knew exactly who Theodora was, what she had done, what she had been. This woman would never wear imperial purple while Euphemia drew breath. So Theodora waited, playing the role of patient lover and reformed sinner, attending churches where everyone could witness her piety, donating to convents, performing redemption as skillfully as she had once performed desire. When Euphemia died in 524 AD, Theodora's path cleared. Within a year, Justinian convinced his uncle the emperor to change the law itself. The new legislation was written specifically to allow reformed actresses to marry into the senatorial class. It fooled absolutely no one. The empire's legal foundation was being rewritten for a former prostitute, and everyone knew it, but no one with power enough to stop it dared speak against Justinian's obsession. The wedding in 525 AD was the event of the century. Theodora entered the Hagia Sophia in purple silk worth more than entire provinces. And the transformation was so complete that foreign dignitaries who did not know her history assumed she descended from ancient nobility. When Justin died in 527 AD, Justinian became emperor with Theodora as his curula, not merely empress consort but Augusta, co-emperor in authority if not in title. She received ambassadors independently, issued edicts with her own seal, commanded her own bureaucracy and budget. No woman in Roman history had ever wielded such official power. But the private Theodora remained a figure shrouded in whispers that servants dared not voice aloud. Palace records show architectural modifications made specifically to her wing after 527 AD, secret passages that allowed visitors to reach her chambers undetected, features that served no official purpose anyone would admit to. Then came January 13, 532 AD, and Constantinople burned. The Nika riots had been raging for 5 days. Half the city was ash, and the Senate openly discussed Justinian's replacement. In the palace, courtiers packed their valuables to flee. The emperor himself stood holding gold and jewels, planning his escape across the sea. The empire was collapsing. And then Theodora entered the room. What she said next was recorded by multiple sources, words that would define her legacy forever. "Purple makes a fine shroud," she told her terrified husband. "I will never see the day when I am not called empress. If you wish to flee, you have the money, the ships are ready, the sea is open. But consider whether after you have escaped to safety, you would not prefer death to salvation." "I will stay," Justinian stayed. More importantly, he gave Theodora control of the response. What followed was not negotiation or compromise, but systematic slaughter disguised as law enforcement. The rioters had gathered in the Hippodrome, the same arena where Theodora had once performed for jeering crowds. 30,000 people packed into a space meant for entertainment, now serving as revolutionary assembly. They had crowned a new emperor and thought they had won. Theodora's solution was elegant in its brutality. She bribed the Blues faction to turn against their allies, positioned troops at every exit, and sent her most loyal generals into the Hippodrome with simple instructions. No survivors. 30,000 people, mostly civilians, trapped with no escape. The killing took 3 hours, and the screaming could be heard across the Bosphorus. But here is what the official histories soften or omit entirely. Theodora personally selected who would die. She had maintained a list, not just of riot leaders but of anyone who had ever mocked her past. Anyone who had used her and then treated her with contempt when she rose above them. The riot provided cover for personal vengeance on a scale that rewrote the aristocracy of Constantinople. When Theodora died in 548 AD, the empire mourned a saint. The Orthodox Church venerated her as a protector of the faith. Justinian never remarried, never recovered from losing her, and the servants preparing her body for burial carried secrets to their own graves, because in the end, Theodora had proven something terrifying and true, that power belongs not to those born into it, but to those willing to endure anything, sacrifice anything, become anything necessary to seize it. She had climbed from the absolute bottom of Byzantine society to its absolute peak, and she had done it by understanding that the world is not kind to the powerless. So the only solution is to become powerful enough that kindness becomes irrelevant. The question that haunts us across 15 centuries is this: was Theodora a survivor who used the only tools a brutal world gave her, or a monster who weaponized suffering to justify monstrous acts? Comment below and tell me what you think, because this story doesn't have easy answers. Only the uncomfortable truth that sometimes the victims and villains of history are the same person, and we have to decide which legacy matters more.